Thank you very much. And it's great to be here, and it's a tough act to follow after Rebecca. She was really amazing and inspiring. So, again, I'm Bryan McCleary, and I'm here to present to you today your Creativity Bill of Rights. And this is going to be 8 simple tips on how to boost your creativity in your work and in your life. As I was getting ready for today, I thought to myself, are people in startups more creative than people in big companies? So I did a little bit of research, and I found that the answer to that was yes. People in startups and entrepreneurs are more creative than people in big companies. So congratulations. But there was a caveat. There was a chicken and the egg dilemma that basically said it was unclear whether people in startups were more creative or whether being in a startup made them more creative. So all of the things that you have to go through in your daily lives as an entrepreneur. But the common denominator with creativity is the idea that creative people are risk takers. And so taking that leap into the entrepreneurial world and then dealing with all of the confusion and chaos and having to imagine and pivot and change your route on the way to bringing your product to market. So risk-taking is a big part of creativity. So what is creativity? There's many definitions, but the one that I found that I thought made the most sense was by an economist named Theodore Levitt. And the definition he came up with is creativity is thinking about new things. Innovation is about doing new things. And I really like this definition because big ideas, I think somebody kind of alluded to this, big ideas are a dime a dozen without being able to execute and without being able to innovate. Or as Albert Einstein said, invention is 1 part inspiration, 1 part perspiration, or 99% perspiration, something I'm sure all of you can identify with. So when you think about creativity, what's the mindset that you should have? Is this a nice to have or a business imperative? This leads us to our first Bill of Rights, our first right. You have the right to a creativity culture. And what do I mean by this? Again, I ask the question, is creativity a must-have or is it a business imperative? I'm not going to read this, but this is basically firms identifying themselves as creative. Let's take a look. Okay? The next is firms that are not creative. Okay, let's take a look at that. So again, the idea here is that there is a comparative advantage to creativity. There is a competitive advantage. It builds brands. It helps you innovate. So you've decided that creativity is going to be part of your culture. I'm sure that the next step would be to rush headfirst into coming up with that big idea. I'm here to say the second Bill of Rights is that's wrong. You have the right to go slow. And what do I mean by this? And again, we go to Albert Einstein, and I'm not going to read this quote, but I'm going to let you read it and absorb it because it's that important. Okay, so what are we talking about here? I'm sure you guys know a little bit about design thinking, and the idea with this quote, the way Einstein defines it, is don't rush into the brainstorm, the famous, vaunted brainstorm. Take the time. And as design thinking articulates it, think about the problem to be solved, the job to be done, and what is that consumer pain point that you're really trying to solve? With Tide, the Tide detergent, it cleans. With PayPal, it gives you instant ease of use. What is it that is solving that consumer pain point? So again, take the time up front. So once you've decided, all right, I've defined the problem, I've spent my 55 minutes, I'm ready to solve it, what is the next step in the process? I imagine you might think it's to come up with something totally original. So the next Bill of Rights is just the opposite. You have the right to not be original. And what do we mean by this? Let's go to Steve Jobs. Creativity is just connecting things. I really like this. Many people consider the wheel to be the greatest invention of all time. was invented 2,000 years ago by Mesopotamians, interestingly enough, as part of pottery making. It wasn't actually until 300 years later that someone had the idea, let's take that and put it on a chariot. And so transportation was born as we know it, and we were on our way. Another example, more modern, peanut butter cups. So there was a commercial kind of a long time ago that basically talked about the creative process that led to the peanut butter cup. And that was, there was a person walking down the street with chocolate, a person walking down the street with peanut butter. They collided, and the peanut butter person said to the chocolate person, hey, you got chocolate in my peanut butter. And vice versa, the peanut butter said, you got chocolate, or the chocolate person said, you've got peanut butter in my chocolate. So peanut butter cups were born. So another way I like to think about this quote is look for peanut butter cup innovation. Okay, so our next right in our Creativity Bill of Rights is you have the right to not start with a blank canvas. And why do I say this? Again, it's part of this idea of organizing your thinking. And the idea, start with a blank canvas, gets thrown around all the time. And I worked at P&G, as you mentioned, and one thing that we would often tell our agencies when they would go off and create was, we're going to give you a blank canvas. We don't want you to have any restrictions. We want you to come back to us with the biggest ideas possible. And most of the time when we did that, that would really fail. And so again, we go back to the idea that constraints can be good. They can channel you in the right direction. Start again with the job to be done, the problem to be solved, and the consumer pain point that you want to alleviate. Another way to think about this is a problem well defined is a problem well solved. Okay, so once you've got this blank canvas, you think, all right, we're going to do the brainstorm. We're going to get the people together. And this is always a dangerous thing because sometimes the brainstorm is a good technique, other times it's not. But you're going to go ahead and do it. The next right you have you have the right to lose the sticky pads, the Post-it notes. Why do I say this? I say this because there's a dynamic in brainstorming sessions that I'm sure you've seen and observed and been part of. Everybody's writing on the Post-it notes. They're flying around, people are yelling, they're talking about their big ideas, they're talking over one another, they're putting things on the board, they're categorizing, they're arguing over what buckets, to identify as, where does each sticky pad go, that sort of thing. And you have, chaos. And you have the typical characters in a brainstorm. So you have the dominator, the person who just can't, resist leading everything. You have the naysayer, again, that person that's like, oh, that'll never work. We don't have the budget. We can't execute that. Then you have perhaps the most important person of all, and that is the introvert. And we've all heard about the power of introverts. They're the people who may have the most brilliant idea of all, but can't get a word in edgewise. So how do you avoid this dynamic? One technique is brainwriting. And I'm sure you guys have heard about this, but I really like it because what it is, you take a piece of paper, you write an idea on it, and then you pass it to the next person who then builds on it and so forth and so on. So if you have 7 people, you have 7 pieces of paper, and at the end of the day, you have 7 great pieces of work that have been built on by everybody in the brainstorm. So let's go to some science. Brainwriting versus brainstorming. 2 groups were sent out, and the assignment was to develop alternative uses for paper clips. So as many uses as you could possibly come up with. So again, one group used the brainstorming method, one group used the brainwriting method. I'm not going to read this, but you're going to see that the group that did the brainwriting had 48% more ideas than the group that did the brainstorming. So very interesting. So you're thinking about the brainstorming, you've identified the problem, you've got a great agenda, then you want to bring in the experts, right? Wrong. You have the right to bring in the generalists. Now, why do I say that? Think back 150 years ago. If you had gotten people together and said, the right experts, and said, all right, we're going to develop a flying machine, who might the experts have been? Hot air balloonists. They would be the logical people that you would want to have, involved. But instead, as we know, it was two bicycle makers who thought about things differently and changed the game forever. I had a really interesting brainstorm that I led a couple days ago in New York, and I pulled together a very eclectic group of people. And so they included everybody from a toy maker to a travel and health writer. And we really synthesized a lot of great ideas and came out with something that I think is going to be executable. But again, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. So, how do you ensure coming out of a brainstorm that creativity doesn't become something that's a one-off or something that's, once a quarter or at an off-site, but something that can stand the test of time? The next Bill of Rights is you have the right to be externally focused. So what do I mean by this? And I think somebody else had a similar comment. You don't come up with big ideas by getting consumers in a room and asking them what product they want. As Steve Jobs said, what you do is you get consumers and bring to them products that they need. So again, that's the way to think about external focus. As Henry Ford said, if I had asked consumers how we could have more transportation and faster transportation, they would have said, we need a faster horse. So again, think about this and think about external focus as being keeping your finger on the pulse, collecting cool, eclectic groups of people. So whether it's an informal kitchen cabinet that you pull together or whether it's a formal advisory board, think about that and look at trends inside your industry and outside your industry. So that brings us to our final Bill of Rights. So you're exhausted, you can't get out of bed almost, and you feel like you're out of creative ideas. What do? This is our final right. You have the right to take a walk. And why do I say this? Again, the science tells us walking can boost creative output by 60%. So simple, yet so profound. So those are your Creativity Bill of Rights. I've really enjoyed bringing these to you. So my advice is, if you remember nothing else from today, remember this slide. Go out and take a walk, or better yet, find me or give me a call. We'll take a walk together, and there's no telling what we'll come up with. Thank you.